Hi everybody and welcome to episode 16 of the Filmmakers Guide to the Galaxy. I am here with James and our guest today is Sam McCurdy BSC. How you doing, Sam?
Hi, Sam.
Very well indeed. Very, very nice to speak to you both.
And you are calling us from where today?
I'm in Vancouver in quarantine.
Well, what's the temperature there like? Because it's absolutely roasting here in London.
Yeah, I've heard that. Everybody I've spoken to tells me you guys are going through a heat wave.
Yeah.
We've kind of got average Vancouver weather for this time of year. It's a little bit sunny, a little bit rainy, a little bit warm, and a little bit cold.
Oh, so it's like England then.
Yeah.
Normally. Yeah.
Normally, yes. Yes.
We've had some sun for a few days, and everyone's like, "Okay, we've had enough now. Can we go back to normal British summer, please?"
You send some more.
Well, let's get started on the old questions.
Yeah, sure.
So, James, if you want to start us off.
So, Sam, how did you get started in the industry? I see you began by doing a lot of short films and small features. How did it all start off for you?
Started off like that. I mean, the road to being a DP was one that started at the bottom of the camera department and worked its way through. I went through the ranks as a central loader, as a first ASC. I was one of the worst first ASCs, one of the worst focus pullers I think the UK's ever had. So I gave that up very, very quickly, or I was kind of pushed into giving that up very, very quickly. And I was very, very lucky. I worked with a couple of DPs that encouraged me to operate. There's a good couple of DPs who I'd worked with who could see that that cinematography was the way I wanted to go, and encouraged that. So got me into operating, and operated the B cameras, the C cameras, that sort of thing. And then, and funnily enough, it was a DP I was working with on a movie that I was operating on, who fell ill within a few days of shooting. And the producers and the directors all came together and asked me if I would step up to shoot that movie. And I went up and had a good chat with a gaffer and a good chat with a grip, and came back and said, yeah, I'd be up for it. So
right.
that was the kind of beginning of. Funnily enough, it was Neil Marshall was the editor on that movie.
Oh, okay. Is that how you met him then?
So you have indeed, yeah.
Right. Okay. So
how we'd known each other before. We'd done some short films together.
Okay.
He was an editor at the time when we first met. But we had such a similar background in movies. That love of fun, I think, in cinema. Whether it was the Indiana Joneses or the Star Wars or for me, the Goonies, things like that. There was that real enjoyment of cinema.
Yeah.
That we both really, really loved, and both made us, exceptionally good friends very quickly. And so yeah, that was my kind of intro to getting to where I wanted to be. Prior to that, I studied fine art and photography at college and university, and I always had an inkling that I wanted to have something within the photographic side of things.
Okay,
It just happened to be, I think it was a period of time where we had access to making short movies, and we had access to 16mm cameras and all that sort of thing. That actually made it quite easy to go off and do cheap and cheerful shorts. You could shoot a short in a weekend with a long 16mm camera and one box of 5 rolls of film stock. It was that period of time where it wasn't easy, but it was considered the norm.
Yeah. And so when you got that break, like, how did you and Neil decide to start working together on the bigger stuff? Well, on Dog Soldiers then?
Yeah. Pretty much. Neil, I think we'd just when we'd met and we'd done a couple of short films together. We'd done some local TV drama stuff together. That kind of the late at night Channel 4 20-minute shorts. We'd done some of those together. And Neil, I remember Neil giving me the script to Dog Soldiers. Goodness me, must have been a good 2 or 3 years before we actually made it. And it was one of those knowing each other so well at the time and knowing our similar tastes in movies. It was one of those where you read it and just went, come on, we got to make this somehow. We've got to make this. This was our Evil Dead.
Yeah.
This was,
right.
This really was our chance to make that low budget horror movie that we were going to be so proud of when we finished it. Didn't matter if people loved it or hated it or anything like that. It was going to be that real passion project at the time that we thought was just going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And but it took a good number of years for Neil to actually get the money raised for it. And even then, I think Neil would probably have a better idea of the figures, but I'm pretty sure the whole movie ended up costing way under $1 million for us to make at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know he started off, doing those films that were like $1 million, $2 million, and then they jumped to like 10, 15 million.
Yes.
And even when it's the lower end, he's got such niche kind of cool ideas. I think it didn't really matter how much money you had. Like, it was always going to be a cult hit, I think.
I think that was always the thing, and it's always the thing with like the two main movies that I'm sure Neil and I get asked about or quizzed about are Dog Soldiers and The Descent. And I think they were both movies that for both of us we made early enough in our careers to not listen to everybody around us, to actually just go out there and just go, you know what, we're just going to do this. We're just going to make them. We're going to make them the way we want to make them. And you're dead right. The amazing thing with Neil is the ability to kind of shut off everything around him and be so focused on a project that it gets you really enthused and it gets you really invigorated by the project. And you throw everything into it. I still... to this day, I don't, somebody, sounds ridiculous, but if somebody said to me tomorrow, oh, could you do another Dog Soldiers or another Descent, hand on heart, I don't know if I could, because they were made so passionately at the time. That they'd be difficult things to recreate.
Yeah. And plus also, I think when you worked with more kit, more money and things like that, and you have more people to help, sometimes you're sport for choice, whereas when you have nothing, like, it's kind of, I know you lit some of the scenes with just like literally just the things the characters were holding, so
Torch lights,
it's whereas if it was, say, like The Hobbit, like they did, like they start putting wall lights up the walls, they overlight it, because they're not, they're scared to embrace it, the darkness,
Yeah.
I think it's a really, really valid point, and I think it's a really key thing for everybody when they're starting out, and it's also something to kind of try and keep a hold of for as long as you can. I think we do learn new ways of doing things as we progress, and as you rightly say, we work with more people and more experienced people, and you start asking for things and you suddenly realize, oh, you can hang lights up in a forest at night for night shoots, and you can hang huge silks up buildings. When you suddenly realize you can do that, I think you kind of, not that we get lazy, but it becomes a bit rhythmical, and you kind of expect it. Certainly the beauty of doing movies like Dog Soldiers and The Descent is nobody could tell Neil and I what to do. We just did it. I remember shooting a sequence on Dog Soldiers in the farmhouse towards the end, and there's two stunt guys in front of me with shields, while can't remember who it was, whether it was Sean, might have been Sean, was throwing bottles at me. You know, it was brilliant. I'm running around a little farmhouse handheld, and somebody's throwing glass bottles at me. It was amazing. And same with The Descent. Neil and I would, during the prep of it and then into the shooting of it, one of Neil's big things was, look, I just want to explore big areas of darkness. So for me, that was perfect excuse to, it's going to be lit by somebody's lighter. It's going to be lit by a flashlight. It's going to be all of those things. And they they certainly gave both those movies the soul that they ended.
Actually, how did that work was that shot on film, I take it, The Descent?
Yes.
So how did that work with obviously the lower ISO and grain and stuff? What were you shooting wide open on some ultra speeds, or what was the deal with that?
Pretty much. We shot The Descent on so the whole movie was shot on 500 ASA Kodak. We shot on Master Primes, right? And which I think are all 1.4 lenses,
1.3 or something. Yeah.
So and we admittedly we were probably wide open a lot of the time. I think the beauty of film was that you explored the darkness a bit more. That's the things that even more so now in the digital age. I think I still look to judge a sensor with how it treats the darkness rather than how it treats the light, because we can control the light a lot more. And I think that's one of the things with film that was really key to movies like that, but was also really, really key to how you structured a movie as dark as The Descent, because you knew you could get it to fall off. You knew you could be pitch black in the background. Yeah. That was the whole point of the movie.
Yeah, and I suppose with that...
I'm working on a film now, and it's all set in tunnels, and The Descent is one of the films I keep saying to everybody, this is how you do dark. This is how you do lights, because in films I know it happens, but when they have like their lighter, but the room's beautifully lit blue. I'm like, that doesn't work for me. I understand it, but now I want to have it. But then if they can't see it, we can't see it.
I keep saying to James, but you want to shoot an anamorphics? I'm like, I don't know how it's going to happen.
Not in there, not in the tunnels.
It might have to be a master anamorphics, but then it won't look like anamorphic, mate. That's the problem.
But I think that's something that I think it's something that we get scared to embrace now. And I don't, not just in the darkness side of things, but I think it's something that we are constantly told how good sensors are, and we're constantly told that we have 20 stops of latitude. One of the things that I think for people who know film, I think one of the beauties of film was actually you could choose a film stock and dictate yourself the latitude of that film stock. Yeah. So, depending on how you rated a 200 ASA film or a 500 ASA film or a 50 daylight ASA film, you could dictate the latitude within that film stock. And film stocks themselves had a latitude, pre-built. We used to use, remember doing a lot of exterior shooting on things like Hills of Eyes and being in places like Morocco, and purposely looking for a bit more crunch, so shooting with 50 daylight. And then when you wanted to stretch it a little bit more, we'd go to 200, and then when you wanted to stretch it even more, we'd go to 500. So and we don't have that so much with digital sensors. It was
in a way there's less choices, and even if people are saying, oh, we're trying to choose between cameras as though they're film stock, but then I think Steve Yoden showed, like, you can shoot on a red and just use an Arri LUT. Do you know what I mean? Like you can you add a bit of green, it looks a bit more like an Arri. You got 15 stops, 16 stops with some cameras. It's mad, whereas the Alexa's still 14 plus or whatever. So I think you can make a red look like an Arri. It's just as long as you get the right post guys or LUT or whatever. I think it's.
I think that's. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think it will eventually get to the point in the development of all the sensors we use. It'll get to the point where there really is no difference, and the difference is going to have to be dictated to us as filmmakers. Certainly for us as cinematographers, Simon, it's going to get to that point where we need, less latitude. And finding a way of being able to compress a sensor, being able to, there's this huge advances and reverses in lens choice. So many people looking at really old school lenses, which is brilliant. But then, there's a technical side of a lens that you need to know that the focus work and the stop is correct, and all of those things. So there's a fine balance that we all need to look for with lens choice.
Yeah, for me, you've got the problem of people learning on like new like pocket 6K Black Magics, which might cost you £1,000, but then they're going, oh, everything looks amazing because they've got like a really dynamic range and 6K.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, I learned on like, I'm ashamed to say it, but it's obviously got me where I am, like a 5D Mark II, which I'm now filming myself on now,
Yeah.
But I learned on this, which has got 10 or 12 stops of range, but I just recorded with the color, burnt in. I didn't record log or anything, and I made sure that whatever I shot was perfect, and I think people aren't used to that now.
I think that's the thing, and it's again, it's a great word in using perfect. I think there's sometimes and this is just personal points of view, but I think there's occasions when you see in the trade magazines or in the in the glossies and all that sort of thing, this strive for perfection, for the ultimate latitudes, the ultimate, holding highlights and holding shadows and all the rest of it. As a filmmaker, I don't need that. As a cinematographer, I don't need every detail in the sky and every detail in the shadow. Actually, that, going back to the descent, that would have been pointless. I'd have been sitting with the shadows all the time, and actually, we'd probably have lit the descent with nothing. It literally, we'd have been walking around just with a bit of silver cards, and that would have been it.
Yeah.
And I think while on the one side, the advances we make in sensors is brilliant because it gives us new things to play with. The fact that our lighting rigs can get smaller and more lightweight, and we can do things with a sheet of silver or a piece of card or a tiny little tube. Is brilliant because it's all new things. But I do miss that. I do miss the idea that I don't want to be perfect all the time. There's occasions when you want the darkness to be really dark. Sometimes I don't want to see people's eyes. I guess it's now in the grade, isn't it? Really, it's rather than. I mean, we can try and do it with a LUT or whatever on set. But obviously, at least it gives you that backup, I guess, in post when the producer goes, I can't see anything.
Yeah, you can then go, okay, there you go, have a bit more.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's another valid point. I think it's certainly a world in which we live in where everybody has an opinion, whether it's too light or too dark.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, as a cinematographer, I feel like, for me, lighting is completely subjective. Yes. But on that side of things, surely there is no right or wrong. You can't be too bright and you can't be too dark.
Yeah.
Because it's the filmmaker's choice.
And it's whatever the story. If you're following the story, then it's fine. If it's bright and really, really bright and overexposed and it's supposed to be the descent, then it's...
Predator Requiem, you really couldn't see anything. Like, the whole film. Anyway, okay. Next question. You've sort of moved on to doing a lot more big television stuff now over, like, films. Do you prefer that, or is it more just like it's how the times is? Do you think?
I think there's a bit of both. I mean, I love one can't deny the budgets are really good to work with. We very, very lucky with certainly the last two shows I've done with Lost in Space and with Carnival Row. Both exceptional budgets with exceptional set builds and incredible casts. Really good writers, really good showrunners, really good stories. So there is a definite, because so much of the money, and I'm sorry that it comes to, that we talk about money, but because the money and resources get put into shows like that, it does attract good writers. It does attract good directors. It does attract.
Definitely a big change now.
Yeah, and I think we all, as filmmakers, I think we all want to work with the people that we want to work with. We all want to work with good people. We want to work with directors who are going to push us. Yeah. With designers who are going to, push envelopes in the sort of structures that they give you to photograph, and in showrunners in how they want to push their new work. And I think as any creative, I think we all want to be doing something slightly different. We all want to be pushed to do new stuff. I've always said this, there's nothing I love more than being pushed by a director. There's nothing worse than knowing what you're doing. Yeah. I think, cinematographer. I think when you know what you're going to do and you know how everything's going to be lit, on that kind of day-to-day basis, I think it's not why I got into the job. I got into the job because I enjoy expressing myself on set, and I enjoy a director pushing me as much as he can and asking for better or different or something that I've never done before. I think we all as filmmakers strive for that sort of storytelling.
How are you finding?
I was going to say about like the scheduling. Like, how do you find the scheduling from a feature film compared to, let's say, TV series? Because obviously there is a big difference there, right?
It is a huge difference. It is a huge difference, and actually was right at the beginning of all this lockdown when the BSC were running a lot of Zoom web broadcasts, and a good friend of mine, Adam Shazitsky, was on, and he was asked a very, very similar question, and I thought he answered it beautifully. There's of course the enjoyment of time on a movie, but the energy created on a schedule in television is something that is unlike anything else. When you're asked, especially at the scale of a Carnival Row or a Lost in Space, once you get to that point where people are demanding,
I suppose they can make it happen as well.
Yeah. They want you to make feature film quality work to put on a. It is home cinema. It's not it's not just a TV show. It's meant to be watched on the 60+ inch TV screen in the in a room, and not, it's not meant, although they're all streaming platforms. I think the idea of people watching things on their phones and their iPads, etc., I think, yes, there's a truth to that, but I think the projects are made to be seen on a big television,
definitely,
and enjoyed, by a family or in a dark room, with the kind of screen as the key focus of what you're doing. And when you marry a TV schedule to a feature film crew with feature film ideas, there's an energy that you really feed off, and you really notice that kind of kick into gear that is fun, is really, really good fun. And as long as you're prepped, as long as you put all the work in up front, it's an incredible experience. It's as good as any feature film.
Do you think some of the...
It's a bit like, like going back to like the early days, when you don't have much money and you're shooting as much as you can in a day, like the guerrilla filmmaking, it's sort of like that, but on a different scale, obviously. But
Absolutely. I mean, the amazing thing is the resources you have around you on a show like Game of Thrones or Carnival Row or Lost in Space. The resources are incredible. You're provided everything. that you need by production. The only remit ever is you've got to make sure you finish your days.
Yeah.
So
you must be on the same. You're on pretty much the same level, I would say, as if Marvel did TV shows, which they are doing. There is that kind of level. I mean, we've had DPs on this show who are doing the new Disney series and stuff like that. So I can imagine it's the things you make is kind of like the equivalent of big Hollywood films where you have a lot to hand, so it makes life easier and they push it a bit. You've got the deadline, you can do it.
Well, that's so true. I mean, when I remember doing the very first, or maybe it wasn't the first, maybe it was the second, doing the second season of Lost in Space, and when you hear, not that we really know what the overall budget is, but when you hear a figure of 100 million plus for a TV season, that's for me as a cinematographer, that's the equivalent of, as you just said, Simon, it's the equivalent of shooting a fucking huge movie.
Yeah.
Yes, I have to. We have to make 10 of them.
Yeah.
And we have to fit it into 6 or 8 months. But the time and the resources and the money are there. You're just asked to make 10 mini movies rather than one big one, and it gives me the opportunity to work with VFX artists that I might not normally get the chance to work with. And amazing as it is. For every season of Lost in Space we've done, the VFX guys have been up for the Emmys every year. And when you get to the point where you're working with people like that, you realize how far you can push things. You realize it opens up especially with VFX, it suddenly opens up a new world of VFX and how you deal with it and how you learn to actually improve everything, how you learn to make a show look better with VFX.
But in terms of the stuff that you do, like you're not on the whole 10 episodes or the whole 6 episodes or 8 episodes, are you? So how do you find that journey? Because obviously, I know you sometimes they're split into 2 DPs over the whole season, but then you have 4 directors or you have 2 directors. I mean, you might not, like the relationship you and Neil have for like making Dog Soldiers, you might not have that relationship or close knit kind of bond with a director doing a TV series. How do you find that?
I think it's a really valid point, and you're dead right. I think there's a tendency to feel that you are you're a cog that has to work within the machine. But I think I've been very very lucky and very very fortunate. The producers and showrunners that I've worked with on the bigger shows afford you that that kind of creative, not control, but that creative assistance that allows you to push the visual style, so that when you are then going from director to director, you're afforded that little bit of luxury of saying, we've been doing this and we can do this, and gauging how the various directors will get a handle on how the show is meant to look and feel. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely we're definitely a cog within a big machine, but I think we're a very valid cog within a big machine.
It definitely seems like a lot of almost harder work, kind of, because there's so many episodes and you have to keep it consistent. And obviously then like the other DP might have to shadow you to then keep the same look, etc., and not change it up too much. And I know, like, I wouldn't say your important gains value on a series compared to a feature film, but obviously the very auteur kind of, arty kind of directors who do feature films, specific ones, like Aronofsky or whatever, their DPs, they're kind of collaborating fully from months, years before or whatever. But they might not, they don't have maybe as much of a say, like you were saying. They're not as clued up on what's going on.
I think there's that again, is that fine balance. I think you get when you're offered a job or when you go up for a job, I think you're expected to understand the project that you're about to work on, I had the honor of sharing Carnival Row with Chris Seeger. Chris Seeger was the lead DP on Carnival Row. I had the joy of sharing Pennyworth with Mark Patton last year. Mark was the lead DP on Pennyworth. So I think when you go in, you have to go in with an attitude of, I'm not going to copy what you're going to do. I'm not going to, nobody gets employed just to mimic, but you are employed to understand what the show is and to photograph it in a sympathetic manner. And I think that's, whether that's, TV show, whether that's feature film, whether that's a commercial or whether it's a documentary, I feel as cinematographers, that's our key role, is to be sympathetic to the scripts every time, and that sympathy may dictate that actually once in a while you have to change it up a bit, and you may get a script that dictates that 80% of your episode is going to be shot handheld, or going to be shot on a crane, or it's going to be shot on tracking vehicles. So there's, I think the how you treat the script is still exactly the same. You still approach it as a storyteller. Yeah. But I think you have to earn the sympathy. Yeah, you have to create the sympathy for the show itself.
Yeah, I mean, I take it obviously specific rooms, specific locations that are throughout, or were in the previous episode that you didn't DP. You might have to go, well, roughly what were you lighting this to in terms of their exposure to, say, the background, or if it's like a very similar kind of thing.
And they're normally the things where you can mix it up a little bit, where they're standing sets or reoccurring locations. They're usually the occasions where you can kind of go in and say, look, wouldn't it be cool to, you've done this in the show so far and this in the show so far. What if it's raining outside? What if we do, and we treat it ever so slightly differently? Or what if we say it's 5 a.m. for this scene, and it's 3 p.m. for this scene, rather than the kind of just generic day, night that might be written in the script. So on that side of things, you're still being sympathetic to the story, but you're getting the chance to just lend a slightly different feel from a photographic standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a bit like in even as a film, the Harry Potter series, they always have their banquet meal. But every film is completely different how they've lit it, and it's all different colours. But you already know what it looks like, so that's already there. You just then play around with it.
I think, that's one of those key things. I think it's fun to play with the audience like that. Whether it be a feature film or a TV show, it's fun to play with the audience and introduce them to exactly the same place, and they recognise it immediately. But you just twist it a little bit. And they recognize it. They know where they are. Yeah.
I'm going to play your reel that you sent me, and we're going to disappear to the bottom here. Let's take these off for a second. Take this off. So everyone at home can see your new reel, which is on your website anyway.
It is, yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just going to start playing it. But I just wanted to ask, so, I mean, like looking at your credits and your reel, there's certainly a lean towards, I think it's fair to say there's a lean towards the medieval. And have you always been a big fan of this type of genre? Or, when I say medieval, I mean Romans, I mean Game of Thrones, I mean, you know what I mean. Swords and sandals, exactly, yeah. And I think, was doing the Centurion early on in your career with Neil, did that kind of get you that work? Was that your calling card then?
I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I think there's I certainly enjoy it. I certainly enjoy it because it's always it's a really good looking genre. Really good, it's fun to play with. I think there's something about, especially when you take the visuals of something like Game of Thrones and a Centurion, and there's kind of an equation there. You know, there is a similarity, but then at the same time, Lord of the Game of Thrones, you know, sits very much in a fantasy world, and Centurion sits in a very much real world. So, but it's a really fun genre to play with, and I think a lot like the horror genre. I think with both of those, you have a kind of visual allowance to play with it, and the shafts of light through windows, and there's an ornateness, I think, to that genre. But there's also a real earthiness and grittiness to that genre. I remember when Neil and I first talked about Centurion, the kind of the original concept for Centurion, and this was again one of the beauties of working with Neil is the ability to have scripts so many years before they're made.
Yeah.
The original concept for Centurion was we wanted to make it on 16mm. We wanted to make it all handheld. We wanted to make it a documentary about the Legion.
Yeah.
And that was prior to cast. And then once people like Michael Fassbender's names started to get attached, there was not a pressure, but I think there was an understanding on Neil and I's side that there was a delivery requirement for the Pathes that needed it to be upped from being this kind of down and dirty 16mm documentary into a movie. Something that felt a little more of scale. So again, the beauty of that genre is I feel we still managed to give it the concept of a kind of down and dirty documentary feel.
Yeah.
The whole movie ended up being a lot more composed.
Yeah. But I think you got that with the in the grade. I think I just saw a shot of it. Blown highlights. Very gritty. Gritty greys and blacks. You've still got that kind of almost video look, but it's cinematic.
Well, that was it. The whole thing. We ended up shooting on 35, but we color graded with Asa he was at Molyneux at the time, I think, and we went in and said we wanted to look grainy. We wanted to destroy the 35 millibits and bring it down into a 16mm field, but with composed frames. And it was again, the beauty of working on film. We knew we were going to do that up front. We tested a little bit of bleach bypass at the beginning.
I was going to say it looks a little bit bleach bypass, yeah.
Well, I'd done a bit of bleach bypass on some previous movies because of the insurance restrictions, the negative insurance restrictions at the time. I think we weren't allowed to bypass on Centurion because it was a studio movie. So we did a few tests, and we tested it with Asa and came up with a look that we then had baked into dailies, and we had baked into for editorials, so that everybody was seeing a kind of a bleach bypass version of the movie as they were cut, knowing that that's where we were going to go in the grade at the end. I
think that's actually I was going to ask a bit later, but like in terms of LUTs and monitoring on set and then in post, are you often using LUTs that you create beforehand through testing, etc., and then you use that all the way through, especially on a series, and then you use that and then just tweak it a bit in post, in the final grade? I'm not a big fan of having multiple LUTs. Right.
I don't think
maybe for daytime or tungsten or night, maybe 5 or something, right?
Not even that. I think certainly the last couple of shows I've done, we've built one show LUT. Yeah. That's normally more based around contrast values than color values. And we've sat with that throughout the show. What I do like is I do like live grade on set. Yeah. So that we'll load the LUTs, and then we will make color tweaks maybe the odd,
I suppose you
odd,
don't need multiple LUTs if you've got live grading
Yes.
going on. It's kind of like constant LUTs,
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then obviously those CDLs are all carried along the line, and so that you get what you want in for dailies, and you get what you want in when you come to the final coloring. But we have principally built those show LUTs with our final colorist, so that we both know exactly where we want to take the show at the end.
Yeah.
And again, because we do, certainly the last few shows I've done, the principal completion has been in HDR. So I've personally found that the contrast level has become more important to me.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Because the saturation levels that you have in HDR are incredible, absolutely incredible. But there's still a tendency, I think, to want to put too much weight into a show, and I don't. For HDR, I find that actually you want to draw some of that. Again, just personally, I've wanted to draw some of that weight out a little bit. So we've built LUTs that have purposely kind of been a slightly lower contrast, so that it gives us a little bit more of that of a filmic look, for want of a better word.
Are you doing? Out of curiosity, are you doing? Like I just have a regular 5-year-old LG LED TV, which I don't know if that's HDR. I have no clue. But are you doing like one grade in HDR and then another grade?
Yeah, so we do a principal HDR grade,
right,
and then we do a secondary SDR grade.
Right, and are there HDR TVs out there? I mean, I have no clue.
There is.
There are.
There is a few.
Okay. I know HDR. I mean, I know all about it. I just don't know if people watch it. That's my question is I don't know.
It's interesting. I did towards the beginning of lockdown, we did an HDR seminar with Dolby Vision and Red, and the audience was huge. I mean, it was a lot of it was to converts. It was to people that were working in HDR, but I asked for some, just when we were going through the prep for it, I asked for some numbers and figures of, actually how easy is it for people like me to stream HDR on my TV at home?
Yeah.
Is the average run of the mill, home Wi-Fi system, is it capable of doing it in everybody's home? And the numbers I started getting back from the guys at Netflix and the guys at Dolby, I found quite incredible. It was like the HDR doesn't really take up that much more bandwidth when you're streaming it to your TV.
Right.
The amount of people that actually now had HDR ready TV sets was, I just found incredible. It was like, wow, I had no idea. And so it kind of gave a bit more of an understanding as to why, my principal grade, certainly on Lost in Space, and why principal grades on subsequent shows have become HDR.
But how do the distributors such as Netflix or Amazon know who's watching? They wouldn't release. I take it they just release the HDR version.
It's a codec. It's the codec when you transfer it.
Exactly.
It.
Yeah. Oh. So it's the choice you make. So the signal's sent out, and then you can choose the HDR version or the SDR version, and the HDR version is coded into one color space.
You do that on Netflix? Do you on under options or something? Or oh right. I need to play with my Netflix TV.
If your TV's 5 years old, Simon, you haven't got it.
I know. I need to. Hey, look, I'm happy with what I watch, and
Me too.
it's fine.
So am I.
So in terms of the HDR, just so people who don't know at home, you've basically, it's like watching more log kind of image. You see more in the highlights, more in the darks. Is that right?
Yeah.
But you're not crushing it as much.
In a simple understanding way, that's it. I can see more of what I'm shooting.
Yeah.
But what I found, certainly with the first couple of introductions into grading in HDR, was actually the levels that you can play with how you want to see things.
Right.
So going back to things that, as we started talking about things like The Descent.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you don't want to see stuff, so surely the temptation is, I've got to make it so everything's visible,
But it's quite the opposite, because suddenly the levels of darkness that I can create in HDR are huge.
Right, because you can see more
So, you can get so down there that there's like nothing exists. But nothing exists so that it doesn't get noisy. It doesn't feel like you're looking for something.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it earlier on. The saturation levels are incredible things to play with. Colors can pop a lot more, but without it going poppy. Without being everything's bright red and bright orange and bright green. There's a new level of creation within the contrast and color values that I just found incredible, absolutely incredible.
And are you finding that the cameras that you're, I think I know the answer to this, akin to and are more leaning towards these days is red because of the RAW factor, and then you've got all that data there?
I think so. I think sensors are a very personal choice, a very definite personal choice. I think I remember using, I'm getting a lot of flack for it, but I remember using, the red one all those years ago and loving it. And okay, it was a tube, and it was
a tube, yeah.
It was
doorstop, yeah.
Unrecognizable as a camera, but the images that I was getting from it, I just fell in love with. I just absolutely fell in love with. And I'm not here. I know I'm not going to knock the Alexa and the Venice and everything else, but I think like film stocks, we find an attraction to a sensor, and we like to play with it. So I'm sure you go and talk to DPs about film stock, and they would say, yeah, I love Kodak, or I loved Fuji. I really liked 500s, or I liked 200s. Everybody loved 9.3. We find an attraction to something, and we like to learn to play with it. You pull it apart, and I certainly found that with the red cameras as they generated, was that each time they developed a new sensor, it was actually slightly different. The going from the red ones to the dragons to the heliums to the, they've evolved, and it's been fun to play with and be involved in that evolution. And the Monstro sensor that I've been working with recently, I've found it reacts to the lenses I like, and I found it reacts to the shows that I've done in a way that I really enjoy playing with. And I know, I've learned to deal with its brightness and darkness, its skin tones, its balance of everything, and I find it fun to play with.
Yeah,
it's not to say we shot Carnival Row on the Alexa, stunning camera.
Was that the LF then? Because obviously it has to be over 4K, or no?
Well, that depends who you speak to.
Yeah.
We shot Carnival Row.
Oh no, that's Amazon, isn't it? So they don't care as much.
Netflix at a
yeah. Sorry.
4K only, whatever, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we shot Master Primes and Alexa Classic on for Carnival Row, and it looks stunning.
Alexa Classic.
Well, Alexa Basic.
Yeah. So I just said Alexa Classic, and my Alexa just said, "Shall I play Alexa classic music?" This is why I can't have an Alexa in the house. It's just don't play anything.
Oh, that's the reason.
Yeah.
So, okay, Sam, you've done your fair share of large-scale action scenes, particularly in medieval movies.
Yeah.
What's it like having to organise and plan for such large-scale action scenes? And what is the technique for covering so much and getting such good shots?
It's a really, really interesting question, and a really difficult one. I think the approach I've I've always loved shooting action sequences. And this is not to say they're easy or anything like that, but I've always loved them because there actually is a simplicity and an understanding of an action sequence that is kind of methodical. That there are certain things that you have to do, and there are certain things that you have to show to make it work.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I've really enjoyed shooting them. I really enjoy that process. I think for so many of them, I'm sure you've been through this many times as well, Simon, that the process of prepping an action sequence is the fun bit.
Yeah.
Because that's the time where you kind of go, okay, so this car's going to come through here, and this car's going to come through here, and this one's going to jump over this one. Where do we want the camera to be? At that point in time, you can do anything. You know, at that prep stage, you can do whatever you want. But the understanding then of actually how you physically, you know, a stunt guy is going to drive a car from here and drive it to here. Suddenly, then the restrictions come in, and you go, okay, so we can't put the camera there, and we can't put the camera there. Can we put the camera inside the car? Can we put it underneath the car, above the car? Can we fly it around the car? So it's a really fun, creative prep time. When you come to physically shooting it, I think the stunt guys and everybody involved has a lot more fun than everybody else.
That's probably true. Yeah,
because
yeah.
it becomes very not painted by
you
numbers.
just want them to get the shot and not ruin it.
You know, you want it. You want what you've prepped to end up in the dailies, and the only way to do that is to make sure you really prep it well with everybody involved, with the coordinators, with the performers, with everything. And so that's where the fun side is. When it comes to actually shooting it, you know, if you've got anything more than 3 cameras on a sequence, it normally means that, you know, I'm sitting miles away with a bank of monitors. So when something explodes, I don't really get the benefit of it. Again, you know, going back to things like Dog Soldiers, you know, the great thing with that was when there was a fight, you were in amongst it, and now you go, you know, you cut to, you know, 25 years later, and you talk about a fight sequence from Game of Thrones, or you talk about a flying sequence in Lost in Space, and I'm so removed from it that it becomes technical. It becomes, you know, did we get that bit?
How many cameras can we get to cover it and not see each other? Can we dress the cameraman up in city clothes? You know,
all of that. It does become, you know, it's interesting. You know, the complete antithesis of that is I shot a couple of dance movies, and
I was going to say that's probably the little Easter egg in your credits. I was like, what? I was like, what?
Working with the choreographers on 2 dance movies was so similar to working with, you know, a stunt choreographer on a big action sequence. You know, once you saw what needed to be photographed, there were certain things that you just knew you had to get on camera. You know, you could do details of certain things, but once you saw the piece, and when, you know, I'm sure you've had it plenty of times, Simon. Once you see a fight, you know, you see that stunt coordinator's first video, you know, on the iPhone of a fight sequence, and you go, oh, brilliant. Okay, we've got to get that. We've got to get that. We've got, you know, that's going to be really dynamic if we do this. And it was really weird, but the two things kind of equated.
I'm sure it is probably pretty close doing a dance film to a martial arts film, because they are dance. They are both dance,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really interesting that is again pushing the envelope a little bit more that we see certainly in movies these days, and certainly in some of that higher end television. Certainly, you know, the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, where you've seen big sequences shot in a single shot, where you see big, you know, in movies you see stunt sequence in Atomic Blonde, for example. The fight on the staircase.
Yeah, we were talking but with the director, the fight choreographer, Sam Hargrave, about that. Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, just incredible, absolutely incredible. But again, we all know that so much of that is in the prep work.
Yeah.
Because you've got stunt performers, you've got artists, you've got doubles, you've got breakaway sets, you've got different cameras, you've got visual effects, all within that beautiful sequence. And it would never happen if it wasn't for the prep work that's put into that. And that's certainly something that I think is incredible to explore. The more we can push things that way because we know how a stunt sequence has been shot, we know how stunt sequences are being shot, and we've kind of seen how stunt sequences can be shot now. And so I think they're interesting things.
They're definitely changing how they used to be in the Arnie days and Sylvester Stallone days. You know, they're not just a guy with muscles now. They're very technical, very camera orientated. You know, Sam Hargrave has shown that in his one take kind of scenes and stuff, and it's very exciting. I think the future of action, modern day action, rather than when you say, oh, it's a action film, people think Van Damme, whereas now it's kind of Black Widow, kind of women fighting all the time, which is amazing, and
it is.
They've done it so well now.
I think that's the thing. I think that the more it gets pushed, some of the incredible stuff they did in the last Mission Impossible movie, the Halo jumps and things like that. I mean, they're just stunning to watch. So stunning to figure out how the hell they did some of this stuff. I was blown away. I'm seeing Atomic Blonde at the cinema, and just that fight sequence on the staircase. I was gobsmacked. It was just like, wow, that's the way to do. And it never lost any of its personal energy. It never felt effectsy. It felt like you were getting beaten up, and it's taking something like, something very, very kind of Asian cinema, that prolonged shot of choreography that I've always been a huge fan of. That you kind of go, that's it's pushing those envelopes into the way we do our stunt work now. It's beautiful to watch. And I know you mentioned earlier about shooting on Alexas and Master Primes, and Master Primes also on the Descent. So they're obviously very sharp and pristine lenses. There's probably more pristine and sharper lenses now because they're a bit old now. But what sort of filters are you using on the different shows and stuff? Because like we mentioned a lot of medieval stuff you've done. You always want to give that a look in the grade and in camera. And with the sci-fi, likewise. What kind of filters are you using on, say, Lost in Space and Carnival Row and things like that? I actually don't use any. Right. Okay. Fair enough.
There you go.
I've been known to cast to carry like the odd low contrast filter or something like that.
Right.
I may carry those. I think it's that not to harken back to the days of film, but I think in how we used to treat film and how we used to make, if we wanted highlights to blow, if we wanted a bloom, anything like that, we would find a way of making it work in camera.
Yeah.
Some of that came from the actual stop that you would try to shoot a movie at. If you wanted big bokeh, or if you wanted, a particular shape in the out of focus artifacts in the background, you would find that with the stop that you shot it at. You could overlight a film stock to create a halo, that without filtration, without having to use nets or diffusions or anything like that. And I think I've just kind of carried that on as I've gone through.
Yeah.
I think the fun of the fun of lenses now, I enjoy. So when when you're choosing a set of lenses for the next show, I find I will change a lot more than I used to. I think everybody's got their go-to ones that they really enjoy working with, but certainly I've probably never used the same set of lenses on the last 5 or 6 shows I've done. I've gone from the Leicas to Cooks to Masters, and next week on this I'm testing the Cook against the Zeiss Radiance Supremes. So I'm I think you're always looking for something new to catch your eye, to make to improve what you do, but you're also looking for something that, as technology gets better, you're actually, for me, I'm looking for something that grows with that technology. So, the Cooke S5s were incredible for Lost in Space last season. I'm testing the Cooke S7s against the Radiances for this next season, and looking for an improvement, and looking for where I get the feel for a subsequent show.
Are the Radiance, are they the ones where you can add different elements to the front and back to the... No.
They're so the Zeiss have just brought out so they've got the Supreme Primes, which are...
Supreme Primes, yeah.
Yep. And they've done a version called the Radiance.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
Which they're coated, so they've got a flare coating on them.
Right, so that's what I meant. Yeah. Sorry, they've got a coating. They're not. So they have a coating, not like a screw-on thing, like the Masters have a screw-on thing at the back of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the ones. They've got a soft blue filtration coating on the front. Yeah. That supposedly, as I say, I haven't used them yet. I've got some friends who are using them.
Well, that would work for sci-fi.
I think so. I mean, again, it was the one concern I had, especially with what I went through as we went from season 1 to season 2 on Lost in Space, is I'm looking for something that lifts the shadows a little bit, and we know and love Zeiss to be that sharp, definitive lens.
Sharp and contrasty, yeah.
And from what I've heard about the Supremes and about the Radiances in particular, is that actually they hold a sharpness, but they've lifted the contrast, which for me sounds brilliant. It sounds like you're almost getting the best of both worlds.
Yeah. So are you always trying to go for, obviously because it's a sci-fi, you want that kind of, I suppose, that glossy, techie kind of sharpness. But I mean, in the medieval stuff, are you, like Carnival Row or other shows or films, are you, what are you doing to kind of give it maybe a grittier feel? Like if you don't want that sharpness, you just going with older lenses?
Just go with older lenses. I think with certainly with something like with Centurion, we pushed and pulled the stock on occasions. I shot the whole movie on one stock from start to finish, and adapted it for day scenes, adapted it for night scenes in the processing. And we shot Centurion on Cooks, again looking for that slightly lifted shadow detail, because we knew we were going to give it such an extreme grade in the end. We knew we needed something that was just a little bit softer in general, so that when we came to mess it up in the grade, it wouldn't just turn to mud. It wouldn't just turn to a highlight, a black and a white. That actually there'd be tones in between.
Do you think that in terms of the lenses? Sorry to butt in. Do you think in terms of the lenses, like we were saying earlier, you've got such dynamic range, and you can almost make an Arri look like a red, or a red look like an Arri in terms of LUTs and color grading. Do you think, other than obviously the physical and visual attributes, like certain anamorphics will give you, like, Cooks will bend inwards instead of outwards, or whatever, which way around it is, and you get certain physical things and blurs and things like that, or the softness fall off and the sharpness roll off, and maybe skin tone and stuff. But in terms of the contrast and colors. Do you think you can do so much in post now that you don't have to worry about that as much with the lenses? I mean,
I think there's a tendency to feel like you can do a lot in post. I think there's still for me, I think you want to give, certainly for dailies and for what everybody's seen on the monitors at any given time, I think you want to give the idea of where you're going with things. Again, I've had that benefit of live grade on set, so when that image first comes in, you have the ability to tweak it ever so slightly to the monitors, so everybody is seeing the concept of what you want. I think I still prefer, in my heart of hearts, I think I still prefer trying to, on a contrast level or on a saturation level, is trying to implement that with the lighting in the first place.
Sure, definitely.
If there is a tweak to be got, I think that's, I got put off, when we first started building LUTs for on work. I think I got put off quite early on by having multiples, because it was a tendency for other people to think, oh, that's what it's going to look like, or that's what it's going to look like. And actually having just a single show LUT that I could then tweak in a live grade fashion gave me more of an opportunity to say to everybody on set and in dailies, this is where we're going. There's a tendency to, unless you're doing something that, unless you are going bleach bypass, or unless you're going, I remember we had some incredible LUTs built for Simon, the DIT on Into the Badlands that we shot in Dublin, and some incredible Fuji LUTs that we played around with for some of that, and they were amazing to work with outside. But the whole show was basically a LUT workflow. So those LUTs all traveled down the line to post, and it was brilliant. It worked very well, but there was still, for me, it was still a tendency. I would still stick with one LUT for the episodes. I wouldn't cheat it for day, night, interior, exterior. I find if there is a show LUT, light to the show LUT and make it work for that, rather than trying to tweak it for color balances, for interior, exterior, for sun's out, sun's in, overcast, raining, all of that sort of thing. I personally prefer to just then find the options within the the color temperature of the camera, or just in the way that you then add or take away light.
With the when you've done say a LUT, when you've created the LUT off, say, footage, the problem is obviously if you're doing that on, say, a cloudy day, but then you have a lot of sun, do you have to then tweak the LUT, or you just flag it to make it look like it's cloudy? I mean, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I would do a sunny version of the LUT and a cloudy interior night, exterior night kind of thing.
Well, I think that's kind of hard. That for me is the whole problem with the LUTs. Is I'd rather not have a LUT built for sun's in, sun's out, overcast, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, all of those sort of things. And actually, because once you start messing with the show LUTs, you might as well not have the show LUT. Or once you start tweaking LUTs, there's no point in having the LUT. Because it was something that you based off something that you're then never ever gonna come across for the rest of shooting. So having something that's just basic and simple and works for me, works with the lens. So I would normally, when we developed the show LUT for Lost in Space, we basically just did skin tone tests in a test room, some LED tests, and some basic color tests. Between myself and Ziggy, who's the colorist at Company 3, who does all of Lost in Space, I would spend half a day in a suite in Vancouver while he was in Santa Monica, and we would chat through what we really wanted to see. What were the skin tones, what were the contrast values of what I had lit with the pure intention of building something that I would use everywhere. So
Yeah.
you're already bearing in mind that your exterior conditions are never going to be correct. So let's just work on a contrast value that is general.
Yeah.
And then tweak the live grade to that. No touching of the show look whatsoever.
But I suppose, like you said, you're still doing a live grade, so you can, you can put the LUT on, but then in the live grade, you can say on a really bright day, you can pull those highlights down a little bit.
Exactly.
Whereas
Yeah,
obviously, if you're like me and you don't have live grade on a smaller budget film or something, you have to stick to the LUT, and obviously, yeah.
Well, then I think certainly. For me, I think it's really important that you build a good relationship with that colorist at the beginning when you're testing. Know in your heart of hearts with the director you're working with what this movie is going to be, what this show is going to look like.
Definitely.
You take something like Centurion, for example, that had such an extreme look. If I was doing that on digital now, I think I would probably build a show that was extremely aggressive, and then all I would be doing would be, apply that to whether it's a sunny day or an overcast day, and yes, try and affect the sun itself, whether that's trying to bring in shading from above, whether that's trying to always work with the backlight. I know it's really difficult really easy for us as cinematographers to say, we'll just shoot with the sun, but the reality of that and a schedule never happens. So it's just covering yourself on a day-to-day basis on a set of being able to say, look, we can do the wide shot here, and I'm happy that the sun's ever so slightly side lit or something like that, but can you help us out when we come to do the coverage and make sure that we work with the sun for the coverage? And then you can work, not everybody can stretch to huge 40 by frames to take the sun out, but you can always, manage to get 12 bys or 20 bys that you can get in and keep the base out of shot for the coverage. When it's just being comfortable with your director and saying, look, to really maintain this look, we've got to be able to do this. And I think that's where that's probably how I would approach a Centurion if I had to do it now. It'd be like, okay, let's build something really aggressive. And then, yes, I will light to that aggressive LUT on set, be it interior, exterior, day or night. You then try and light to that LUT because that's where you want to be at the end.
Yeah. No, that's great thinking. Good method.
Don't know how practical it would be. But I think you've got to strive for that if you can.
Yeah.
Okay. If you could travel back in time and give yourself, your young self, any advice when you're starting out, what would you say?
Well, we'll call this the roundup to the show as well, in terms of what advice you'd give others. But what advice would you give yourself, other than maybe less tattoos or more tattoos, or?
I think the big thing, if I was to go back and give myself a bit of advice, I would certainly say no a little more often. I think there's a tendency when you, certainly for me, I was again very, very lucky in that very early on. Neil and I developed a really good relationship, and we both worked through our stepping up together, which meant neither of us had to say no to each other. It was a constant kind of, yes, we can do this, yes, we can do that. And when you work away from a really good mate, the tendency is to take that same attitude to everything. It's like, oh, I'd do anything for my best mate. I'll make sure I can do anything for the next production I work on. But I think for me, it's actually sometimes quite good to say, no, I can't do that.
What as in certain jobs, or something when they ask you on set?
Maybe a bit of both. Maybe certainly the on-set thing. When you're being pushed by, as the younger DP that I was, being pushed by a director or by a production or whatever, saying, look, you've got to make this work because we don't have the money to do it, or we've got to do this and we've got to do that. and just kind of going yes sir, no sir. I kind of feel like actually, standing up for what you believe in is sometimes things that we don't do when we're younger.
I think I need to say yes more. I think that's my problem. I need to say yes more.
Yes to the projects, but then no when you're on set and you don't want to do those things.
Yeah.
That's the fine balance. I think there's, we strive to please. I think certain, when I first started out, I think I definitely was striving to please everybody, and I wish I could go back. Well, not wish, but I think the ability to say no once in a while is actually quite a good one.
Okay. Well, that's some good advice to your younger self and to everyone watching. Sam, we've gone way over our hour slot that we try and give to ourselves, but it's been absolutely insightful.
Great chatting.
Yeah, great chatting to you, and hopefully everyone watching at home have learnt something about your career and the advice you've given us all.
I don't know how much anybody would learn, but listen, guys, it's been brilliant.
Thanks,
it's been brilliant. Simon, James, thank you so much.
Cheers, and
great.
Yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Take care. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.